Well, welcome to today's episode of Real Life Perspective, and it is film day. Because today is the day that we film, because it's the day that we release episodes. Because it's Friday! So if you pay any attention to films and when they are released, you would know that a lot of big blockbusters are released during the summertime. And this may be because a lot of students are out, or the families are out and we're going to films together. Whatever the reason may be, a lot of big blockbusters are released during July and June. However, this year, a lot of big blockbusters have been released during fall, namely Skyfall and Lincoln. Welcome back to the game, Mr. Spielberg. Where have you been for the last 20 years? He hasn't made anything like remotely amazing since like E.T. and Jurassic Park. Like, what have you been? Anyways, sorry, that's my Spielberg thing. I love Chris Nolan and Spielberg is overrated. But anyways, I'm sorry for those of you who love Spielberg. I like him too, but it's been a while. Anyways, Indiana Jones is another one he did. Anyways, if you're paying attention this year, there's some big ones that you should really be paying attention to, and if you haven't been, shame on you. You are filmmakers, you should be paying attention to this stuff. Shame, 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 naughty, naughty, bad dog. If you don't go, I'm gonna make Bane slit your throat. But anyways, I'm serious though. If you have been paying attention, there's a new trilogy. This should give it away for some of you, though there's another one that's involved, but it's one of them. Specifically, I should keep talking on what I should be talking about, because I generally get distracted and I talk about that clock that's ticking up there, or that creepy nutcracker over there who attacked people in our Christmas special. So, how did you like the Christmas special, by the way? We got a lot of positive feedback on it. People seem to like them for the most part, though not a lot of people really responded to it like we had it with Noir, but at the same time, people... No, but really, if you did watch it and you did like or have some positive feedback for us, we have a comment box below, which you guys don't use that much, so use it because it's there for you. Because I want to know. I want to know what you're thinking. How could you go out and do these things without telling me? I just want to know everything about you. But anyways, back to the major trilogy that just came out, or the first one was released, which is The Hobbit. It could have been Star Wars, because that's the new trilogy that hasn't really come out yet, but it's been announced. But anyways, The Hobbit is such a big deal because it's shot in 48 frames per second. Now, why is this so significant? Well, before I can explain this to you, you really have to know a little bit of film history. Traditionally, films were shot in 24 frames per second, and it's what we've been viewing in the movie theater forever. Online, you see 30 frames per second. But, you know, why would you use 24 rather than 30? And why does it look so much different to us? Well, it looks so much different to us because we have learned this is what films look like. And so if we see 30 frames per second, it doesn't really look like film to us. However, the reason why they originally chose 24 is because they shot in film rather than on SD cards, because they didn't just automatically upgrade to digital. And 24 was the absolute slowest they could move the speed, the frame rate, which is individual images per second, that the motion that they captured could still be perceived as actual motion. Whereas, you know, if you pick 22, motion would look a little bit more like this and just a little bit less natural than this. So, in which case they picked 24, because if you picked anything higher, you had to pay for more film per second, and that would be very, very costly. So over the years, we have really just learned that the cheapest possible frame rate is what movies should look like. So our brains are trained to think that. Not that it looks better or anything, though some people do like it better, but really it is nostalgia that they have learned that 24 frames per second is what movies should look like. Whereas internet video is 30 frames per second, though occasionally you will see 24 on, you know, people who are trying to be more cinematic. But the big deal about 48 frames per second is that in 24 frames per second, because you have less images per frame, motion is a lot more blurred. So you can see this, instead you would see something more like this. The hand, when you have more images per second, captures it much more clearly and it doesn't blur quite as much as you would see this. Whereas my hand does blur, and in 24 frames per second it would blur a whole lot more. So, the biggest thing is you can't move the camera as quickly. So any of your dolly shots or jib shots would be a lot more blurred. Also, the way that you shoot, you cannot do quite as much of a run and gun type shoot because things will blur. You'll get worse rolling shutter with 24 frames per second because you don't have as many images per second clarifying where exactly the picture is. So, people don't like 30 because it looks too normal to them. The general eye, the things that you see, are perceived at a rate that is most similar to 30 frames per second because you don't actually see images per second, but in terms of natural motion blur, you do see what is around 30 frames per second. 24 frames per second, because it is slower, allows you to get deeper into the movie, but at the same time you can't move quite as quickly. So the big debate is, why would you want 48 frames per second? Well, it does remove a lot of the quick, motion blur. Things become like this. So why would you want to see things more like this? Well, in an action film, things are going to look a lot more violent when they don't blur together quite as much. When they seem like they're happening much quicker, these higher frame rates are called hyper-realistic. So they are going to look, the motions and attacks are going to look much more violent than they normally would. So I never recommend using 48 for like romance movies or things like that, but violence, definitely. 48 does help it. 48 also, if you're doing a 3D movie, from what has been reported and from what I personally experienced, does remove a lot of the eye strain. A lot of people complain that they feel like they're going to vomit after watching a 3D movie, namely my mother. I don't know how many other people besides her have that problem. She could just have problems, and that's very likely. But 48 frames per second does seem to release everything. It feels so much more natural when watching a 3D movie, and for the longest time I have hated 3D, and I've been like, no, never 3D. But in The Hobbit, a lot of the depth of field complaints that I have had have been fixed, though there are a couple of issues, like the defocusing and refocusing seems a little bit unnatural to me, but nothing that I don't expect to see fixed within, 5 years. I could see 3D becoming huge, and it's becoming available on a consumer market and everything, and it's just very, very promising. So look forward to The Hobbit. If you haven't seen it, go and see it. My goodness, Peter Jackson, good job. And if you've ever seen Sherlock, the guy who plays James Watson, or John Watson, James Watson, who plays John Watson actually is the Hobbit, is Bilbo Baggins, so that's kind of interesting, and I kept thinking, some of the characteristics are exactly the same. But anyways, off that note, go see The Hobbit if you haven't seen it. Look forward to 48 frames per second. Don't watch it in 24, so you have to watch it in 3D and see the HFR is high frame rate, so you have to see it in 48 to get a real understanding of what it would look like, or also just convert it to 24 frames per second. But one of the good things about 48 is people have said, and what I personally experienced, is it still looks like films how you would normally expect it, because it is exactly twice 24 frames per second. So people say that it looks a lot more like film than 30 does. So, go see for yourself. Judge for yourself. A lot of people didn't like it. I loved it. I personally see it there. Look forward to 3D, and we will see you on Monday for our New Year's special of recapping what we've done here on Real Life this year. Thanks for watching.